Hi kids, today we will be seeing the second video on the chapter reproduction in plants, and today the topic which we are going to deal is asexual reproduction in plants. Remember, in the first video I told you there are two modes of reproduction, one is asexual and the other one is sexual. So we are going to study in detail about asexual reproduction in this video. One type of asexual reproduction, that is vegetative propagation, we have already covered in the first video. So in this video we will be dealing with the remaining topics of asexual reproduction, the remaining types of asexual reproduction. So we will start. Okay. Now the first type of asexual reproduction technique which we are going to study is Budbing. As the name indicates, it is the formation of a bud. Okay. Now in plants like yeast, okay, yeast is a fungus actually. In such plants, in lower groups of plants like algae, fungi and all, okay, different variety of modes of reproduction you can observe. This is one such mode of reproduction which you can see in fungus. Okay. Now yeast is a fungus, yeast. Okay. See, the organism is yeast. You can observe the process of budding in yeast. Yeast is a fungus. It is a unicellular organism. During the time of reproduction, what happens is that, see, this is the body of a yeast. This is the single cell of a yeast. The organism is having only a single cell. It is unicellular. The single cell of yeast will be having a nucleus in the center. Okay. Now what happens during the time of reproduction? See, from the body of the yeast you can see a small bud developing. A small bulging is coming out of the body of the yeast. Okay. And what happens to this bulging? The bulging will be enlarged and slowly the bulging will get separated from the body of the yeast. Okay. So the yeast on which the budding is occurring, you call it as the parent cell. Clear? Yes. Now just observe the second diagram here. The bud is being developing here. It is developing only. It is forming only. A small bulging is formed. Okay. Now as this bulging is forming, you can observe that this nucleus which was inside the parent cell is slowly extending and it is trying to divide into two. Then all the contents inside the cell, that is also trying to move into this bulge. You call them as a cytoplasm. The jelly-like substance inside a cell, you call it as a cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm and the nucleus a little bit is entering into the newly formed cell. The newly formed bud, you call it as the daughter yeast or the daughter cell. And the other one on which the bud is produced, you call it as the parent yeast or the parent cell. So see, finally a bud with a nucleus is produced on the body of a parent cell. Clear? Sometimes the bud will get detached, the bud will get separated from the parent and the bud will go, okay, and it will develop into a new yeast somewhere else. Sometimes the bud will not get separated. So what happens? The bud will be attached onto the parent body itself. That bud will again develop. Okay, it will mature. Once it is mature, on that bud, another new bud will be developing. See? Okay, that will also not get detached. Again from there, another bud will be formed. Like this, a chain of yeast cells will be formed. Okay, the buds, the newly formed buds, if they are not getting detached from the parent body, you will get a chain of yeast buds. Clear? So this is a process of budding which occur in a yeast. So what is budding? The process of asexual reproduction by the formation of a bud. You call it as budding. Clear? Yes. So budding is over. Now in this budding topic, you are having an activity to do. It is activity 12.3 in your textbook. Now what is that activity? I will tell you what is that activity. In that activity, you have to take a little bit of water. Into that water you have to put a little bit of sugar. That means you are preparing a sugar solution. Into this sugar solution you have to put a pinch of yeast. Take a little bit of yeast and just put it into that sugar solution. Wait it for some time. Let the yeast be there in sugar solution. What will happen? After some times, the yeast, it's a living cell, no? This living yeast cell will take up that glucose and it will start dividing. Okay, the yeast cell will start the process of budding in that sugar solution. The yeast will multiply in the sugar solution. Okay, now after some time, if you take a little bit of the sugar solution and if you observe it under microscope, you can see chains of yeast cells like this. Many yeast cells. You can see lots of yeast cells reproduced by asexual method called as budding in the microscope. Okay, understood? So, this is the activity 12.3 in your textbook. Okay, so with this budding is over. Now, we will move on to the next method of asexual reproduction, second type, the second method, that is fragmentation. As the name indicates, fragment means pieces. Fragmentation means formation of pieces, breaking up into pieces. Okay, so here this type of asexual reproduction occurs in plants like algae and all. Okay, the slimy natured substance which is seen during the rainy season, that is what is called as the algae. Now this is an algae called as Spirogyra. The name of this algae is Spirogyra. This algae is green in color, it is having chlorophyll, it will photosynthesize. Okay, so you can see the green colored Spirogyra. Now this algae will reproduce during the time of reproduction. During the time of asexual reproduction, what will the Spirogyra do? The body of the Spirogyra will be divided into lots of fragments. See, 1, 2, 3, it is fragmented into many pieces. Now, every piece will grow into a new Spirogyra. Okay, it will develop into a new Spirogyra. So, it is a simple technique, isn't it? The body is getting divided into many pieces. Every piece is developing into a new organism. This is what is called as fragmentation. Example, Spirogyra. Budding example, yeast. Okay, yes. Moving on to the third type of asexual reproduction technique, it is spore formation. Now, what is the spore? Spores are asexual reproductive bodies produced by certain groups of plants. Okay, spores can be produced by most of the fungi, then some plants develop spores on them. Okay, they are asexual reproductive structures. Every spore can develop into a new organism under favorable condition. Okay, now right now we are going to see, in this slide you are going to see about the spore formation in a fungus called as bread mold. You might have seen the fungus growing on bread, isn't it? You call it as rhizopus or bread mold. Okay, now if you are going to see such a fungi, if you see such a fungi growing on the bread, you take that small piece of bread and if you observe it under a microscope, you can see the fungus in an enlarged way. You can see the spore formation. If the spores are matured, you can see spores also under the microscope. Under the microscope, what all things will you observe? See, you can see long filamentous thread-like structures on the bread. You call them as the stolon or you call them as the hyphae. Hypha or hyphae. The long filamentous thread-like structures which is growing over the bread. You call it as the hyphae. From this filament, you can see from here and there on the filament, so many small branches will be coming up. Can you see? Short branches will be coming up. At the same point, you can see root-like structures growing down. The root-like structures growing down, you call them as the rhizoids. And the short stem-like structures which are coming up, small tubes which are coming up, you call them as the sporangiophore. P-H-O-R-E. Sporangiophore. Clear? Now, the tip of the sporangiophore, it will be like this. This may be a hyphae. If this is a hyphae, you can see a small tiny branch coming up. This one you call it as the sporangiophore. Okay, at the tip of the sporangiophore, you can see a bulb or a blob-like structure. You call this blob-like structure as the sporangium. You can see it in this diagram also, sporangium. This is the blob-like structure, sporangium. Now, inside the sporangium, what you can see, inside the sporangium, there will be lots of tiny asexual reproducing bodies. You call them as spores. So, the spores are produced inside the sporangium. Sporangium is born on the tip of a sporangiophore. Sporangiophore develops from a long filamentous hypha or a hyphae, singular and plural. Okay, so is this clear? So this is a spore formation in bread mound or in rhizopus. Now you can get such spores in some plants. See, have you seen ferns? Ferns. Okay, if you check the leaf, the underneath of the leaf of ferns, you can see spores there. These tiny structures, they are all spores produced on the leaf of the fern. Okay, see, this is a moss. Okay, inside these capsule-like structures also, you will be getting lots of spores. Okay, so these are different asexual reproductive bodies in different plants. As the type of plant changes, the type of spore forming structures will also change. But spores always remains the same. Understood? Yes. So now, what is a spore? Spores are asexual reproductive bodies. Asexual reproductive bodies. Now these spores are very lightweight. Hence, they can be very much transported through air. The wind can easily take them. They are very lightweight. Okay, next, these spores are having a hard protective coating to withstand unfavorable condition. So, if this is a spore, okay, so if this is a spore, the spore will be having a tough outer coating. The outer coating will be very thick, okay, and this outer coating will help the spore to cope up with its unfavorable condition. Okay, it will be having a hard protective outer covering. Clear? Yes. Now, when a favorable condition comes, what will happen? This hard protective covering will break. The spore will germinate. Under favorable condition, the protective covering will break and the spore will be germinating into a new organism. The new organism will be coming out of the spore. So, this is the spore formation. This is the asexual reproduction by spore formation. So, how many methods of asexual reproduction did we study right now? Number 1, budding, example yeast. Number 2, fragmentation, example Spirogyra. Number 3, spore, example bread mold, ferns, then some plants like mosses. Okay, so hope this video was clear for you. It's a small video, only small topic we covered today. So study well, have a nice day, be safe, bye.